vacant here. Well, it's great to see you all. You look wonderful. Are you being enriched today? Enjoying your time with the ELC and Mid-Level Management Symposium? All right, good. Can we close that back door? Thank you. I want to close it because we're going to have a real conversation today. I am Tiffany Eubanks Saunders, Head of Diverse Segments at Bank of America's Private Bank. I'm also an ELC member and so pleased to be with you all this afternoon. I'm here with three of my most esteemed colleagues who are Black executives, senior executives within Bank of America. We've got Bernard Hampton, Rosh Reed, and Patrick Carey. I'm not going to tell you what they do just yet because I want them to explain what their jobs are. But today's discussion is going to focus on, quite candidly, a topic that we don't talk about enough, which is Black executives, Black leaders driving revenue, owning P&Ls within corporate America. And the reality is there aren't enough of us. So let me just kind of set the stage before, a couple of facts before we get started. So Blacks make up roughly 13% of the US population, we all know that, but we're only about 8% of professional roles in the US. There are fewer than 10% of senior P&L leaders that are Black in corporate America. So those who are owning P&Ls and driving revenue for their organizations. Black professionals hold only 3.2% of all executive and senior leadership roles in corporate America. And less than 2% of executives, top executives, which would be if you were to look at a company's information or documents, it would be the top 5 positions on like their proxy statement, so what they report publicly. So less than 2% of top executives at the 50 largest companies in America are Black. In 2021, there were 40 Asian American CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. There were 20 Hispanic and Latino CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. How many Blacks were there? 4 or 5. Got 4, 5, 2, 2. 20, okay, 20. There were only 6. So 40 Asian, 20 Hispanic, 6 Blacks. For whites, the ratio of those in service types of roles versus those who are in management is roughly 7 to 1. So for every one white manager that you find out in the workplace in a professional type of role, there'd be about 7 laborers or people that work more on an hourly basis. What do we think that ratio is for Black America? 173 to 1? That's a good guess, but no. 173. I don't know how she came up with 173. But 173. Not quite that high. Any thoughts?
70 to 1.
70 to 1? 30 to 1? The answer is 105 to 1. So you're probably close. there are 105 individuals who are working, Black individuals who are working hourly types of roles, or as they are more commonly known as laborers, compared to 7 to 1 in white America. So this is exactly why ELC exists. If you don't know it by now, the purpose of the organization is to identify high potential top Black talent and help usher it into higher levels of corporate America. Because the reality is, if we can't do that, then we can't create any type of substantive or material economic mobility within the Black community. And so that's really the purpose of today's conversation, is to talk about Blacks in these types of positions. The reality is, most of your CEOs, most of your C-suite, most of your senior level positions, we just talked about how low the statistics are in terms of representation for Blacks in those roles within corporate America. The reality is, the feeder pool for those roles, regardless of race, are people who are driving revenue. People who are driving their businesses from a P&L perspective. And so when we don't sit in those positions, we exclude ourselves from the opportunity to elevate within those organizations. And so I, along with my colleagues here, all sit in revenue generating P&L types of roles. And like I said, we're amongst the top Black executives, top executives period, within Bank of America. All of us sit within 3 levels of our CEO. And so we want to have a real conversation about not only why is this important, but when you have the opportunity to sit in those positions, how we can drive positive change and impact for those who are around us in the communities that we live in. So let's get started. Patrick, can you share what your role is and what you do within Bank of America?
Sure, is this on? Can you hear me? So I'm Patrick Carey. I manage what's known as credit at Bank of America. So think of it as consumer and small business credit. And all that means is that we underwrite, so we fulfill and underwrite products. And think of it as every consumer product at the bank. So that includes home mortgages, so first mortgages, home equities, lines of credit, small business, consumer card, consumer vehicle, and we also have merchant services. And so the way to think about us is we have 2 functions. One is an operations function because we have to fulfill the loans. If you apply for any of these products at the bank, you're probably going to you will interact with my organization because we have to make sure that you're credit worthy to loan the funds to you. And so we do that. So that's the operational piece. But the other piece that we're responsible for is making sure that the credit quality is high. Right? We have certain parameters that we can blend with. And so my responsibility is really around the balances that we are responsible for across each of these asset classes that I just mentioned. And so, if you think about, well, it's just this room. We are responsible for about $296 billion worth of balances as of third quarter, and for our wealth space is another $108 billion.
Raj?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. So I'm Rosh Reed. I sit in our sales and trading businesses. So I run a global team which is called Senior Relationship Management. And what we are a sales team that cover within, on the institutional side, the top 150 clients of our global markets business. So the clients here that we're talking about are your BlackRocks, Fidelities, Blackstone, Apollos, all your big institutional investors, whether it be a hedge fund, a money manager, alts player, etc. And my team, and we're a global team, we're responsible for covering the C-suite of those organizations. So we're covering the CEOs, CFOs, all the people that are really the key decision makers, and making sure that we're driving revenue across our equities, fixed income businesses, as well as partnering with our banking teams to make sure that we're capitalizing on what we call the wallet of the client. So each of those clients are doing deals, they're buying securities, selling securities, and they're paying the street. And my job and my team's job is to make sure that we're maximizing how much Bank of America is getting across all the various sleeves of businesses we do on the sales and trading side, as well as our financing businesses that are linked to those businesses. So when you think about our client set, those 150 clients, if you just take the top 30 of those clients, those asset managers, their AUM sits at about 60 trillion. So 60 trillion just for the top 30. And that continues to grow. It's grown over the last 5 years by 15 trillion. And so our model is to make sure as our clients are growing, that we're growing in what we're doing with them as well. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Bernard?
Hi, good afternoon. It's so good to see you all. Bernard Hampton, with the privilege of being the Managing Director and Preferred Banking Division Executive for the eastern half of the country. So think about our financial center channel operations, the 11,000 plus wonderful teammates who focus on the solutions that make clients' financial lives better. And so think about everything that can be solved around those that cross through banking, lending, and investing.
And so you noticed one of the things that we tried to do was make sure that we covered a number of different functions or parts of our business. Bank of America has 8 different lines of business, and we've got up here Bernard, and he's very modest. I mean, he basically runs half of the country in terms of our retail franchise. And so whenever you see, Bank of America financial centers and all the people that are in those, as well as some of our entry-level preferred solutions for building wealth, Bernard has responsibility for those individuals as well as all of those deliverables. And then Raj talked about, the trillions of dollars in assets that she is responsible for in our banking and markets organization. And then Patrick, of course, the world doesn't go around without lending. And this is the gentleman who sets the strategy and ensures that Bank of America not only lends responsibly, but that we also lend with a level of accountability. And personally, my role as head of diverse segments in our private bank is to set the strategy for how we're going to create opportunities and really educate, quite candidly, a whole community of diverse individuals in this country who've never really been taught how do you take $1 and make $100. The wealth industry, unfortunately, has turned a blind's eye, quite candidly, to the fact that the fastest growing segments of wealth in this country are diverse segments. But oftentimes, even though as many of us in this room generate incomes today that are higher than multiple generations before us combined, we've never been taught how do we take income and translate that to not only wealth for ourselves today, but most importantly, generational wealth. And so between the 4 of us, as you can see, our jobs are a little bit lofty, lots of responsibility, but what we all are very clear on is the fact that when we step in the room or sit at the table as Black executives, we come with a whole community behind us. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how do we deliver on the responsibility that we have and hold each other accountable for making sure that we create a way for others in the future and that we're delivering value and impact to our community today. So with that, I'd like for each of you to talk a little bit about your leadership style. You're all leading very different businesses, of course, with different types of clients, but talk a little bit about your leadership style and how you develop that style, just given your career, your experience, and some of the challenges that you've had to go through. Bernard, you want to start?
Sure, I'll get started. I think my team would answer that question, which is the way I always try to think about it. What would my people say? Would say transformational. That's certainly evolved over time as my career has grown and the need to be able to lead at scale has changed and impacted that quite a bit. And further, what I mean by it is, it means, from my perspective, that I need to always be focused on how do I build, stretch, challenge people to extend themselves beyond what they thought was possible, but with support commensurate to that. And ultimately, it drives a really heightened level of collaboration. It expands the capacity of the team. It expands their ability to think about and invest in those that they're responsible for at a different rate. They become much broader enterprise leaders in that vein, and quite frankly, it makes it not only a lot of fun, but it also helps to create more capacity for me, which by extension creates the opportunity for them to lean into different areas and take on larger footprints and responsibilities in the organization.
So I would say three things when I think about sort of leadership and how I've evolved over time. One, I think it's undeniable we're all very metric driven, because I think at the end of the day, particularly when you're in a revenue generating business, you can't argue with the numbers. And so I think part of my leadership style is making sure on the metrics that I communicate that clearly. There's KPIs that are clear and established, and that we get input into that, from the team, as I think about setting it for the team globally. So that's one. I'd say the second thing is I'm a big believer, and this is a little bit of, I'm gonna talk a little bit about mama all the time, because that's where it all lies at the end of the day, particularly when you're raised by a single mom. We all have ownership in this thing, So we all have ownership in the house, right? Whether it be the chores we had to do, etc. And so for me in my business, I try and make sure I give all my team members ownership, a piece of ownership, so something that they actually can have their name on. And in doing that, I think about it in terms of making sure I lean to their expertise, their strength, but then also give them something else that they can own that I know is a stretch, so that they can really feel they have a growth opportunity, and I can, hopefully say, see, that person can do more than just X, what they're known for. And then I think the last piece is just advocacy, right? Making sure I'm out there, representing what the team can do. I'm advocating for my people and for how we can deliver to clients, how we help the business do that, how we as a business do that. I think all those three things are important, and I think that's where I am now as I continue to evolve.
Yeah, I would say, from a leadership style perspective, there are two things I would say that people would say about me, and it's collaborative and empowering. And you've heard up here that the responsibilities that we have are wide, and so you cannot run a business thinking that you're going to control every single aspect of that business. So you've got to empower the people who work with you to do exactly that, knowing that we're going to make mistakes, and that it's okay to make a mistake. I think, one of the things that has impacted me coming up is realizing when I started my career, I thought I had to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And to some extent, it had to do with my color, right? You have to be perfect. You've got to be better than everybody else. And the higher you get, you realize it's not about being perfect. It's about knowing where to get the answers. So I would say, if you were to ask my team, I know this because I just got a 360-degree review. They would tell you that I'm collaborative, I'm empowering. I do like to get their opinions because I also feel that multiple opinions allow me to make the best decision. Regardless, and you guys know, right, there's always this one person, a team that nobody, when they raise their hand, everybody goes, oh God. But I've learned over the years that you actually need to listen to that person, because that person is going to bring up something that other people just wouldn't. And they bring a perspective to the table that 9 times out of 10 you probably want to know about, regardless of whether you agree with it or not. Because then you can have dialogue. And so I try to be more collaborative, understanding that the buck really stops here. And I'm the one who's going to get fired first if something screws up.
That's right. That's exactly right. Do we have another mic by chance? I want to make sure we get questions and thoughts from the audience. This needs to be a collaborative discussion. It needs to be very interactive. So as you all have questions or thoughts, please jump in there. And until we find another mic, you'll just have to shout them if they come up. You know, I think I agree with all of you in terms of some of the key elements of leadership that you all have. The only other one that I would add that I think we have to be conscious of and very clear about as Black leaders in organizations, no matter what level we're at, is that, you know, Patrick said this, oftentimes we come to the table understanding that we have to run harder, faster, oftentimes have to be smarter, because we are one of very few, if not the only one. And oftentimes we're breaking a barrier in the role that we have. One of the things that I think we also need to be accountable for is making sure that for those who feel as though, those of us who feel as though they're not given license to be who they are or to show up, to speak up, we have to seek them out and give them the support they need to be strong until they can be strong on their own. We had a session here Monday within Bank of America. We have a series that we call Black Women Ready to Lead. And it's an internal program where we go around from city to city and pull together our high potential, top talent Black women at all levels of the organization. And we pull them out for a day and just talk about those topics that are most relevant and meaningful to Black women in the workplace, in our workplace. Because we know that those issues, challenges, and concerns are different from our counterparts, and they need a safe space to talk about them with others who understand. After the day, we were wrapping up, and one of the comments that was made that really just broke my heart is one of our teammates, you know, and she was very emotional when she said it, but she said, you know, my entire career I've spent time and felt like I was being beige. Like I was just kind of there. And I didn't know how to show up with who I am and all that I have to deliver, all the value that I can contribute. And so the only thing I'd add to what these leaders have said in terms of leadership style and some of the critical elements that you'll want to make sure that you incorporate as you rise to different levels in your organization, especially from a revenue perspective, because Raj is right. At the end of the day, it's all about, did you hit the goal or not? And hopefully we've exceeded the goal, which buys us, you know, another year in the role. Quarter. Weeks, in some instances, when the market's like it is today, weeks, maybe days. But it buys you a little bit more time, but make sure that you always see who is it in the organization that's beige. Who is it that needs somebody to reach out and pull them up? Give them an opportunity. Again, want you guys to jump in with your questions. This is more about you than us. As ELC members, we've seen a lot, done a lot, and continue to try to impart some of our experiences with you all so that you can learn from our lessons. So I want you all to be very interactive in the discussion. Okay, so Ebony, which let me just say, I don't know if y'all seen Ebony yet, but let me just brag for a minute because I am so proud and I was so tearful when I heard. So Ebony is the very first Black president of Bank of America's foundation. She was named earlier this year, and we were all so very proud and honored to have her step into that role for a company that is hundreds of years old and has one of the largest foundations in corporate America. And to have a Black woman who graduated from an HBCU, Aggie Pride, to be given the opportunity and step into it boldly. She's doing a phenomenal job. She knows she's got about 300 Black executives right behind her there to hold her up. But that's just, that's a perfect example of Black excellence and what we can do when we put our minds to it. And I will tell you, she leads like she needs to lead, and make sure that others around her who look like her have the opportunities that they quite candidly would not have had if she were not in those roles. Yes.
Hi, my name is Stacia Namick, and I'm at ExxonMobil joining everybody from Houston, Texas. It's quite humbling to be here, quite honestly, and to hear such inspiring speakers and stories of leadership and growth. And I'm a little nervous, if you would just excuse me. But
Take your time. Take your time, sis. This is family. Take your time.
It's always shocking. Sometimes when the emotions come through, but I wonder if you could give some advice around how you kind of accelerate your learning as you step into a space where you really are going to be tested to scale your leadership abilities. So stepping from supervision and individual contributor jobs into like a layered management kind of job, like second, third line, fourth line, you know, 2 people removed from the 3 people removed from the vice president. And kind of just what are your tips when you know you cannot know it all, and you're going to have to lean on people. You need to trust, but there's probably some verifying that you need to do too, right? Like trust but verify.
Verify then trust.
Verify then trust, right? What are your tips to kind of navigate that space when truly everything is new? The level of leadership, the business line, the people around you, just your honest advice.
Thank you for answering that question. If you're vulnerable enough to ask it, so I'll be vulnerable as well. I relate to your question because I remember a time I struggled with imposter syndrome, like being in that room, stepping in, how do you hold your own, especially if it was a time when there weren't a lot of folks that looked like you, so you didn't really have a safety net. And I'll tell you a few things that made a difference. One was, I think it's overused but underutilized, is when people tell you to build your own personal board of directors. And it was so critical for me to seek advice and guidance for people outside the company as well as inside the company. And diverse group, diverse backgrounds, diverse skills, because one thing that holds true is smart people can have an opinion or develop a point of view when asking enough questions about any topic. And when you learn to value that, you'll value people that may have very different disciplines than yourself or what you're headed into. The second, again, took me a while to form this one, not as comfortable with it initially, but you need to learn to have the meeting before the meeting and be able to seek advice and collaborate. And I can't tell you the number of times it saved me just by reaching out to understand from folks that were sitting around the table, sometimes with their direct reports, other times with them, so depending on the person, to say, hey, tell me this person's point of view, tell me any relevant history about a particular topic or role or contribution of it. What are some things that they've typically seen as barriers beyond it? And it allows you to be able to do your homework and research, because one thing's got to be true, you always got to be the most prepared person. And you can't do that without other people. So sometimes it may take us, or it took me longer by doing some steps that maybe I didn't have experience in that area, and then ultimately it paid dividends for me to do so. That's a couple.
Yeah, I would say Bernard is exactly right. It's all about the pregame, right? So I'm from Louisiana, football all day long, right? So you gotta scope out the players, and you have to figure out what makes them tick. right? So meaning, what is it, whether it be for their role, for their business, what is it that makes them sort of do what they do, particularly if they're doing it well? And how can you make a connection with that? I always say you pour a little bit into them, they'll give you a little bit back, even when they don't want to, because they'll have to, because they'll realize that there's something that you have for them, but you need to also seek out first and kind of extend that olive branch first and figure out what they need and what you can help them with. So I always, particularly with working on a trading floor, right? It's interesting personalities you have to deal with, right? Coming from all walks of life, right? And honestly, a lack of understanding of certain walks of life. And so for me, figuring out how to connect with those heads of trading, those key traders, those that really were important to my business to help us drive what we needed to do from a sales perspective was like, all right, what makes him tick? What makes her every now and then tick, right? And then coming to it with the perspective of knowing that you have something in your toolkit, right? You may not be fully prepped for the game, but you got here with something, and figuring out how to use that expertise that you do bring to make them want more of it, and create kind of a feedback loop needing relationship. That's how I've sort of thought about, sort of building that.
Yeah, I would only add everything here, but also half the battle is you already know that you're in this role, to the point that was just made, for a reason. And I will tell you that the things that I've seen and I've experienced that make you successful is actually the transferable skills. It is not the knowledge, the detailed knowledge of the unit. And I think, now I'm going to say this, you probably won't like it, but I think you should be prepared to know that you're going to have to put in some time. I mean, you're going to, listen, when you go into a new area, you're going to have to realize you're going to have some long days, but how you spend the time is important. One of the things that I've always done, and it's worked really well for me, is, and it ties back to, in pouring a little bit into them and them giving you a lot more, is I actually go in and I would always do what I call side-by-side. So you can do them virtually or you can do them in person. And I'll go down to the line level and sit with them and say, tell me what you do. Just show me what you do. And what that has helped me do is, as I go into the meetings with my peers, I can actually have a working understanding of what this group does. And actually, I end up having more detail than some of my peers would. That's what I would do.
So certainly all of this advice is salient and relevant. The other one I would add is, at the end of the day, as much as you try to prepare, as much as you go in and try to learn some things you didn't know, to Rash's point, try to get to know people who may not necessarily want to get to know you, you have to also recognize that you need space to breathe. Bernard talked about imposter syndrome. And while that is a new woke term that's out there, what we know is that there are still days, even when you have felt like you found your footing and you show up authentically. There will be days when you just need a break. And so one of the things you have to do is find that person or find those people who you can go to whenever you are broken. Whenever you just had one of those days, or whenever you just need to breathe. And we used to, I'm a little older than I think most of you all are, but we used to call that, or we used to have a term that said, I need to, you call somebody and say, well, I need to get my purse. And that's kind of code word for, sis, I need to talk. Cynthia Bowman, who's our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, is sitting over here, and there have been numerous nights where Cynthia and I have been on the phone so late and so intense where each of our husbands have respectively said, "Who are you talking to? Why are you still on the phone this late?" Because you just need a place to go. You need someone who understands and who can just listen to you, even if it's just to vent. Most of the time is to come up with solutions or thoughts about how you handle a situation and move forward. And then at the end of the day, if nothing else, is someone to cheer you, to tell you that you do belong and that you are worthy. And today was a bad day, but tomorrow will be a new one.
Aisha Jackson, Bank of America, Private Bank. So just situational question. I think across most enterprises there are hidden gems, right? We know that it's important to have board of directors, to network, relationships, all that good stuff. And sometimes we have teammates that do exactly that. And then there's that one role that comes up. You, as senior leaders, you engage with a lot of people. And some believe that when roles come up, you already know who you want in that role. I don't know, right, wrong, maybe not true. But let's say that you are in that situation. Let's say that you have an idea of who might be good for that role, but no one that you're overly excited about. What is going to persuade you to take a chance on someone that you have not had an opportunity to observe? And maybe their background is a little bit not so traditional based on the type of candidate that you typically hire in that role. What's going to persuade you to take a chance on that person?
So it's so funny you say that, because we're actually, my team and I have been working on this now for months. That's just exactly that issue. And I've said, look, we're going to take a chance on some people. And the reason is because Bank of America has 200,000 people. And I think everybody on this stage is really good at developing networks. And like things like the ELC summits here, if I meet people that really blow my socks off, I go back and I say to my HR person, put this person, here's their card, put their name on my list, because I want to be able to reach out to them at some point in the future. Well, you can't do that across 200,000 people. So one of the things we've recently started doing is for jobs that we're posting now, we actually are looking at the job description where it says 15 years of accounting. We're like, do I really care if you have 15 years of accounting? That's old stuff. I don't need that. I can teach you accounting. And so we've actually gone out and stripped out a lot of what we've been asking for. And then when people are coming in, I just had this conversation, we would say, okay, look, I know what you would normally take. This person you're saying has been here and yada, yada, yada. But this person really came in. They have the drive. Look at what they've done in terms of just how they've interacted, led, the projects they've worked on. And I literally, we're going to play somebody as we speak, trying to do that. You have to understand that you can't stick to the old things that we used to do don't work. So you got to do something new. So that's something that we're doing.
Do we have the mic? Where's the mic? The mic, okay.
I'll just add, I think it's important to your point, just take the role and think about it with a new perspective. So for example, in my business, it's all about if you can sell, right? And that means various things. It's managing the client relationship, it's understanding the intricate products that we work with on the fixed income equity side, structure it up, put whistles and bells on it, put names, acronyms up the wazoo to make it sound all fancy, but all we're really doing is transferring risk, ultimately at the end of the day, and putting a price on that transfer of risk, and then allowing our investors, our customers, to earn a return off of it, and then we clip a little something in the middle, a little spread in the middle. That's really what the business does at the end of the day. And so one way this manifests itself in the sales and trading side is even when we're recruiting, one of the things that's always looked for is we have all these interns come in, or even young, professionals coming from different walks of life. And the first thing they'll typically tell you is, give me your stock pitch, right? Like, what's your stock pitch? Or tell me what duration is on the fixed income side, et cetera, et cetera. And this used to be, and really kind of still is, the metric of like just baseline, does this person have a working knowledge of finance? Are they interested? Are they trying to get their hands in it, et cetera? Well, many of us don't really have that background because daddy hasn't worked on the trading floor or is not former head of sales. And mama didn't run, X financing business at the firm. And so we come to the table differently. So one of the things I've been trying to do is when I'm at these tables on the committees, and first of all is being there at the table, right? Being on the committee, the hiring committee. That's at the junior level, mid-level, and at the senior level. It's saying, okay, he couldn't give me a stock pitch, but can he sell? And what is it in his past that shows me he has the ability, or she has the ability, to make a connection with a client and or own a craft and be able to actually pitch it and sell. And so for me, that's been looking at a candidate, and we just did this recently where we hired someone, a young brother, who didn't come to the table with his stock pitch. But he came to the table with, hey, I'm in school, I work multiple jobs, and on the side I started X little venture. And I went around my neighborhood and I saw this customer need that wasn't fulfilled, and I got people together and I got a financing plan of really mom and pop and cousin and everybody contributing. And by and large, I started this little small business. And I'm running that while I'm in school and paying my debt, etc. And so to me, we wound up getting this candidate an offer, and people, oh, right? What is this? What is this? And I'm like, trust me, there's something here, because the skill set doesn't have to be packaged in the traditional way. I just need to know that the skill set is there and that it can be developed. And lo and behold, a couple years later, one of the top salespeople in the business on the fixed income side, because he's able to really do it. But we had to fight for him. Someone had to say, this looks different, but it's the same skill set that we can develop.
I'm trying to do this quickly because I know we got a line I want to be able to get to, but I love the framing of your question. And I'm going to say something first that says, your perception is not bad, because a leader that plans for succession in their business should know talent, skill, build people that are able to fill a pipeline, have multiple choices. And so I've done, I think all leaders do it. The key becomes what ultimately makes the decision though. And for me, it's always, I challenge the 18 executives who are on my team to do the same thing I do. When you either know the role is coming open or it's open, first thing you do is list the critical opportunities in that business, and what are the specific skills necessary to ensure that team accelerates. And then the third piece is, what's missing on my team? So what am I looking for? And often it's that last one that takes a little bit more weight than the other ones. And because I'll tell you, I had an opportunity to export 5 executives in other parts of the organization over the last year, replace them, and they're the strongest team I've ever had. Because anytime you have an opportunity to replace someone, you're making it a very intentional decision to make your team better or worse. You're never going to keep it the same. It's going to go one direction or the other. And the end result of that today, a little bit less in diversity because of the folks I exported, but the team has never been better. And my team is 71% diverse, with 50% women. But out of the end of it, some of the tightest collaboration that you've ever seen, because it is the decision piece points become, are they constant learners? What's the breadth and depth of their experiences, the experiences that are missing from the team? And then will they fulfill a role in bringing a skill set to the organization and team that we were missing? Those things elevate and accelerate.
So unfortunately, time has come for us to part from this discussion, and I know there were a number of people who had additional questions. Our information, each of our names is in the program, so please don't hesitate to reach out. I think you can find all of us via LinkedIn. We'll be around over the course of the next day and a half, so grab us if you have questions. And we're going to wrap up here, but we really hope that this isn't if it's the first time you've had this discussion, we certainly hope it's not the last. Because in this room, there's a community of Black leaders who will be, if you're not already, at those levels of leadership. And you've got to have a community to lean into, to support, and who can support you. So let's keep the conversation going. And on behalf of my colleagues, wish you all the very best. We know that you're awesome at what you do today, and you're going to be phenomenal at what you do in the future. And we're here to support you. So thank you so much.